Hey everybody, and welcome to this segment where I'm going to discuss some watches that I feel like need to be highlighted. While we're at it, this segment is going to be strictly about skeletonized watches. We're actually not going to really talk about Rolex too much. I know you guys in the comment section have asked me to kind of stray away from Rolex and do some other watches, so I've decided to do a three-piece skeletonized dial segment where I've got three of my favorite skeletonized watches in front of me that we have in stock. Unfortunately for you guys, these watches are not for sale, and I'll explain that more later, but right now we're just getting into the review side of these watches, and if they come up for sale, I'll let you guys know, but you can always hit me up. I can always allocate these watches for you. In the event that you decide you want to buy one, you must have one. So moving on, it's just a real quick wrist check. I have a very interesting watch on my wrist today, and that is, I know we said we were going to talk about Rolex, but I'm just wearing one today, so don't shoot me in the face. I'm just kidding. I am wearing a Rolex GMT Master 6542, which is the very first GMT Master introduced around 1958. And this particular watch is quite beautiful with that Bakelite bezel. And this actually, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it does have a tropic dial as well. Unfortunately, there's a couple things specifically about this watch that I would notate is the bezel is an aftermarket bezel and the hands have been since relumed. I would much rather have an aftermarket bezel than use the aluminum bezel, which is what they've commonly done. Is Rolex will swap this out for an aluminum bezel, which just for whatever reason just looks awkward. This just at least gives it the look. Of course, if we can find an original bezel, we will, but the bezels alone are damn near half the cost of this watch. They can go up from 30 to 50K depending on how nice they are, so that is a ridiculous investment for a bezel. But at the end of the day, if you want your watch 100% original, that's what you have to do. Even if you have the original bezel though, just on a quick note, I would still advise buying one of these aftermarket ones simply because preservation is everything, and this allows you to wear the watch and not worry about hitting it on a door because these are actually made out of acrylic, so they are very well known to break and they can fall apart on you, or they can just simply fall off the watch and you're out. And they have a lot of radiation presence, so and the Geiger counter of this watch goes off the charts. I know you guys seen me use the Geiger counter, but this one particularly is really fun to see because that dial is very active. And it's actually giving me quite a headache just being around it, so probably should get that checked out. But regardless, that is my wrist check for today, so moving on to these wonderful watches in front of me. The very first watch we're going to talk about is probably the loudest watch in the room, not just metaphorically speaking, but literally speaking. This is an extremely loud watch. I've had the pleasure of wearing this watch a few times out in the wild, and I have to say, it is actually obnoxious, and is the Panerai 767. And if you guys are familiar with this watch, it is a beast coming in at 47 millimeters. I just want to show you guys just how loud this watch actually is. I'm going to put it up to the mic for a few seconds, and what you're going to hear is basically what I hear in my head every time I wear this thing. So it is, like I said, it's obnoxious. I love this watch, but my only caveat to this piece is the noise it makes. I was going to the quiet part, hold on. So there's a quiet side and there's a loud side. So as the tourbillon rotates on its axle, it actually gets louder. So there's a certain spot it hits that just resonates with the case and just really projects that sound. And then when it goes to the other side, it's very quiet. So that's the loud side. It's extremely loud. So if you like to hear yourself think in a quiet environment, this is not the watch for you, because if you set it down in your nightstand, you're going to hear it chirp all night. When I was one-on-one with this watch and I wore it for a few days, believe it or not, I stuck this watch in another room completely because I could just hear it and it almost just sounds like nails on a chalkboard over time. What's up, Jimmy? Jimmy's interrupting the segment. So one of the most interesting aspects about this watch is, believe it or not, it is a 3D printed titanium case. That is right. Panerai found the technique in 3D printing this steel, and it is absolutely phenomenal what they have done with this watch. And not to mention design aspects of that skeletonized dial is incredible. These watches come in an array of different ways. You can get this watch in titanium and black ceramic from what I can see. They also have different dial colors out there, such as this blue one, and they have a green and so on. So let's talk about the movement for a second. As you guys know, I'm a Terminator fan. So this has the coveted T1000 movement. No, I'm kidding. It actually isn't a T1000. It is actually a skeletonized P2005/T, which is gorgeous in all aspects as far as Panerai. I'm not all that much of a Panerai fan, but this Panerai, being that it's monstrous in size and absolutely crazy in design and very noisy. This one really strikes with me. It's a really awesome watch in person. One thing that's really interesting about this watch in regards to the tourbillon itself, it's not rotating in the traditional manner where you guys are used to seeing a tourbillon where it kind of goes around the dial as such. It's actually rotating clockwise in there, but it's rotating on the axis quite differently than you're normally seeing. So it's actually rotating inside of the dial, going up and down, which is why that sound is quiet on one side and loud on the other. So it's quite an interesting dial. But moving on, functionality of this watch. So it is a GMT, skeletonized dial, 6-day power reserve with an AM/PM indicator. It does a lot of cool little things with this watch, especially having the design aspects that it has. This movement has been seen in quite a bit of different Panerai models as well, not just the 76-7. It's also in the 1060, which is insanely gorgeous, and there's a few radial mirror models that utilize it. So you can explore this on Panerai's website, but this is one of the coolest movements, in my opinion, that Panerai has ever produced. One really cool aspect about it too is rarity, being that I always tell my clients, buy rare. If it's really rare, buy it, because your money is much safer in something that is far more scarce. So with this watch, there's only 100 units in this model. You can swim with this watch. It does go to 100 meters. Very interesting skeletonized watch. I'm gonna take a deep look at it. I'm gonna try to look for dust. I'm gonna try to see what all is going on with this movement under the loupe. So yeah, the finishing on this movement is quite spectacular. I have to say, it almost has like a tennis racket design where you can, it's got a mesh plate that gives it almost, it really kind of comes off as a tennis racket. And it's got that AM/PM indicator at the 3 o'clock position and simple hour, minute, and GMT hand. Interestingly enough, it doesn't say Panerai directly on the dial. It is actually written on the rehaut of the watch, where it says Luminor 1950 Panerai. That's it. And then at the bottom, it says Lo Scienziato. This is an Italian word, so if I butcher this, I apologize. Scienziato. So it's got 3 barrels also, just so you guys know. 3 barrels to give it that 6-day power reserve. So it sounds like each barrel really equates to 2-day power reserve. So they combine 3 of them to have 6. That's what simple math tells me. But yeah, overall, very beautiful watch. So far from what I've seen, this is probably my favorite skeleton watch on the table. And we still have a Richard Mille to go over and a Cartier to go over. All right, the next watch I'd like to discuss with you guys as a skeletonized watch. It's not as skeletonized as you're used to seeing with RMs, but it's still considered a skeleton dial. It is the RM 6701 in white gold. As you know, RM is a heavy hitting brand. I don't have to explain it to you guys. These watches bring the big bucks. This particular watch is north of 200,000 on average, and very beautiful watch in person. What I really truly like about this watch and what I appreciate about this watch, it's not like every other RM in this torno shape where it's this thick. It is actually very slim, and it is actually very wearable. A lot of the arms that I've come across in the wild are just very thick. Really, the guys who have bigger wrists seem to appreciate them much more than guys like me that have smaller wrists. I mean, this is the model for me, the 6701 or the 6702 with the NTPT cases are fantastic pieces. Diving right into this watch, it doesn't really do much for me in a sense of lust, but it's a very simple watch in design, where you really just get hours and the date. Everything else is just kind of pretty and really well polished in a sense. Again, proportions to this watch are fantastic. You can really wear this watch with just about anything. It could be a suit watch. It could also be a t-shirt, jeans, be out and be comfortable in yourself. You can really wear this watch and apply it to any kind of aspect of your life. The first thing I notice about this watch is the crown. It almost looks like a rim off a Ferrari. It's not designed to exactly be that way, but it definitely gives you a lot of usability and a sense of operating it. And when you operate the crown, you'll notice that this watch has a sub dial that says W, D, and H. So I'll break down what that means, because I see this on a lot of APs and I see this on a lot of RMs. And what it simply means is the W means wind, the D means that you're in the date function, and the H means you're in the hours function. So, it confused me when I first saw it. I never really knew what that meant until I broke it down and finally understood what it does, because when you pull out the crown, it's going to go right to H. Now that lets you set the time, and then if you go in one more, it's going to go to D, and that lets you set the date, and then all the way in is where you wind it. It just does not screw down to the K, so you don't get the extra insurance of a screw down crown, but they say it's watertight, so good luck there. Hopefully you're really strictly relying on the seals working at that point. Obviously it's an automatic movement. I believe it's just simply a 3-day movement, 2-day power reserve, 3-day power reserve. It doesn't have any elongated power reserve. One interesting thing I like about these watches is the way the straps are put on. It's very secure in a sense, because this strap is not coming off. And the one way you're gonna have to take this strap off is you actually will need to find yourself buying the RM screwdriver set that allows you to take the bracelet off, or the strap off in this case. And they're not cheap. I think last time we ended up sourcing one, just the screwdriver itself was just north of $400. That's a lot of money just for a screwdriver. But you do need it to get the strap off. And when you do get the strap off, it's pretty simple, straightforward. You know, you just kind of loosen those 2 screws here. This is the 2 screws right there that you need to loosen up. Comes out, tighten them back down, secures the strap. The only one thing that's funny about this watch, it really just gives me Star Wars vibes. It looks like the bottom side of a X-Wing or just something really interesting. It just gives you that kind of Dark Star vibes when you really loop out this dial. It is a luminous dial too, so the hour hand, minute hand, and the outer dots glow, which are really nice. The actual hour markers themselves do not glow, so where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., they don't glow. That's the only thing that disappoints me about this watch. They could have made that luminous in a sense, but I think that would look cool. Another really cool thing I really like about this watch are the hands. The hands are where the vibe is at. If you loop out these hands, they have such a cool, neat, brushed look. You really don't. I've never seen that type of brushing anywhere except for RM. They really love to show off the fact that the movement was was adjusted in 5 positions. And there's some funny, weird things that I can only imagine the watchmaker at RM understands, but I don't. There's just arrows pointing at like random screws, and I guess the watchmaker would know what those do. I don't, but you know, maybe we can learn. So let's talk about some key points about the movement itself. One interesting thing to start off this is the rotor is actually platinum, and it does utilize what Rolex does, is it does have a free sprung balance. So the way they get that free sprung balance to work is they put 4 independently adjustable weights on the outside of the balance. It breaks away from having the traditional balance in a sense where it's a cheaper made balance, you know, the way they traditionally do it, versus having a free sprung balance, which is what Rolex does. RM does that, and obviously a few other brands. And the way they do that is by putting counteracting balances on the balance itself, almost like in a sense of like a tire, where if you put on one side of the tire, it helps balance out the other side. It kind of works in the same way. Another thing interesting is this has a lot of characteristics that Rolex has. I know we weren't supposed to talk about Rolex, but this movement really has a lot of interesting and notable specs that Rolex uses. Same thing with the movement. It beats at 28.8 beats per hour. Uses kind of a similar Inca block system to protect the movement, and obviously that free sprung balance is another key point. And it's, you know, being that it's simple hour, date, time, etc., really puts that movement in the same class as a 3135 in a sense, but far more over-engineered than a 3135. We'll give you that, RM, Richard Mille. You know, yes, your movement is very, very, very well engineered. Like a lot of brands, they use precious metal on their rotor. So in this particular watch, the rotor is made of platinum, which is just really, really neat. And it just kind of separates it from the herd in a sense, whereas everybody in the lower end division of watchmaking would use just stainless steel or whatever the base material of the movement itself is. Enough with the RM6701. Final watch we have on the list of skeleton watches we have in front of us today is the Cartier Dumont in 38mm with the skeletonized dial. And if you look closely, the skeletonized dial is configured in a way to actually look like Roman numerals, which took me a while to actually see that until I just noticed it. So really cool watch. It is my least favorite, but it is still nonetheless a very, very neat watch. These Cartiers are famously bust down, and what's really interesting is there's so much material inside of the dial that when they do bust these down, they actually bust down the Roman numerals inside of the dial as well, which gives for a very interesting look when you have diamonds just encrusted inside of the skeletonized dial. It is actually a very nicely sized case. It's a 38, where some of these have come up, they come up in the size up to 47, 48mm. They come huge. I'm not a huge fan of that, particularly Cartier designs. It's got the famous Santos XL design case, which, as you guys know, has been famously used for quite some time. Let's dive right into this movement. This particular movement is a 9614 MC. So we're gonna take a look at it and see what we can find. Just like I was saying, the actual support system for the movement itself is a Roman numeral design looking dial, which again looks really, really cool, and especially with these solid blue hands. You know, the way they actually put this watch together is quite interesting. It's kind of sandwiched in there. When you guys look at a crown of a Cartier Santos, they famously use a jewel in place of the centerpiece of the crown, which Again, they've been known to do this across most of their watches. It just looks really, really nice. Gives it a signature look that Cartier goes for. What I don't like about this particular watch is the lack use of screws. So typically on a Cartier Santos, this is a Dumont model, but typically you would see the screws on the outside around the bezel. But for whatever reason, this particular model does not have the screws. So to me, overall use of this watch is going to show a lot of wear and tear, a lot of scratches. And it's just going to come out and be more relevant when you don't have the screws that kind of, in a sense, hide. They don't really hide the scratches, but it kind of takes away from looking at them. Not a fan of that, but it is a beautiful watch, especially under the loupe. The way they finish the dial is really nice. In steel, I feel like this would be a much cooler watch. Rose gold's not my thing, but it is very beautiful in nature. Again, not that to say I hate the watch. I don't hate the watch at all. I think it's a cool watch. It's just out of the three that I showed you guys today, this is the least favorite. And being the Panerai is I would say this one gets my favorite out of all three of these pieces today. So I hope you guys enjoyed that segment. Let me know in the comments below, what was your favorite watch out of these three? Which one would you wear? Let me know.